The blood on her hands would not wash away no matter how hard Elena Zimmerman scrubbed them in the cold creek water, and the cowboy watching her from 20 feet back knew exactly why she was shaking. It was late September in 1878, and the Missouri sunset painted the sky the color of fresh wounds as Zachary Oakes kept his hand near his revolver, not because he intended to use it on the woman kneeling by the water, but because he had seen three riders pass on the ridge an hour before, and he knew they were looking for someone. The woman had stumbled into his camp near Clifton Hill just after dawn, her dress torn, her dark hair matted with dust and what might have been blood, and she had looked at him with eyes that held more terror than he had seen in men facing down a grizzly. She had not spoken a word in the 12 hours since, just followed him at a distance as he moved his small herd of cattle toward better grazing land, and now as the sun disappeared behind the western hills, she finally lifted her head and met his gaze. "They will kill me if they find me," she said, her voice rough from disuse and fear. "I should not have come near you. I have put you in danger." Zachary moved closer, his boots crunching on the rocky ground. He was 26 years old, tall and lean from years of hard work, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of cedar bark. He had been working cattle since he was 14, had fought in enough bar brawls to know how to handle himself, and had learned early that sometimes the law and justice were two different things entirely. "What did you do?" he asked, keeping his voice level and calm. Elena stood slowly, water dripping from her reddened hands. She was perhaps 23 or 24, with delicate features that would have been beautiful if they were not twisted with exhaustion and fear. Her dress, once fine fabric, was now ruined beyond repair. She looked at him for a long moment, clearly weighing whether to trust him, and then the words came tumbling out. "I killed my husband," she said. "Jacob Brennan. He was the eldest son of Thomas Brennan, who owns half the land around Clifton Hill. I shot him in our bedroom 4 nights ago, and I have been running ever since." Zachary absorbed this information without visible reaction. The Brennan family was well known throughout this part of Missouri, wealthy and powerful, with connections that reached all the way to the state legislature. Thomas Brennan had 3 sons, and if Jacob was dead, the old man would spare no expense in finding the person responsible. The fact that it was Jacob's own wife made it even worse because it would be seen as a betrayal that demanded blood payment. "Why did you shoot him?" Zachary asked. Elena's face hardened, and he saw something fierce flash in her dark eyes. "Because he was going to kill me. He had done it before nearly 3 times in the 2 years we were married. Each time he would apologize, swear he would never raise his hand to me again, and each time it got worse. 4 nights ago, he came home drunk and angry about some business deal that had gone wrong. He had his hands around my throat, and I could not breathe, and I knew if I did not do something, I would die right there in that room." She paused, her breathing ragged. His pistol was on the bedside table. I do not even remember reaching for it. I just remember the sound, and then he was on the floor, and there was blood everywhere, and I ran. Zachary nodded slowly. He had known men like Jacob Brennan, men who thought their money and name gave them the right to do whatever they wanted to whoever they wanted. The law rarely protected women in situations like this, especially not when the man involved had power and influence. If Elena went back to Clifton Hill, even to explain what had happened, she would hang. The Brennan family would make sure of it. "Those riders I saw earlier," he said. "They were heading east, probably toward the next town. They did not see us, but they will be back, and they will have more men with them." Elena wrapped her arms around herself. "You should let me go. I will head north, try to make it to Kansas, or maybe Iowa. If they find you helping me, they will consider you an accomplice." "I am not letting you wander off alone," Zachary said firmly. "You would not last 3 days. You have no supplies, no horse, no weapon. Come back to my camp. We will eat, and I will figure out what to do." She hesitated, clearly torn between accepting help and protecting this stranger from the consequences of aiding her. Finally, exhaustion won out, and she nodded. His camp was simple, just a bedroll, a small fire, and his horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Copper. He had supplies for another week, dried beef and beans, coffee, and hardtack. He set about making a meal while Elena sat on a fallen log, staring into the fire. The silence between them was not uncomfortable, just weighted with the gravity of the situation. As they ate, Zachary found himself studying her more carefully. Despite the dirt and fear, there was a strength to her that he recognized, the same quality he had seen in women who had crossed the plains in wagon trains, who had built homes in hostile territory, who had survived things that would have broken lesser people. She had killed to survive, and now she was fighting to stay alive. He respected that. I have a cousin in Colorado, he said after they had finished eating. Runs a ranch outside of Denver. He could use help, and he does not ask too many questions about people's pasts. It is a long way, but if we travel smart and stay off the main roads, we could make it in a few weeks. Elena looked at him with surprise. You would do that? Take me all the way to Colorado? I was thinking about heading west anyway, Zachary said, which was only partially true. He had been considering moving on from Missouri, but he had not made any firm plans. Cannot make a decent living with cattle around here anymore. Too many big ranches squeezing out the small operators. Colorado has opportunities. She shook her head. I cannot ask you to give up your life here for me. You are not asking. I am offering. He poured them both coffee from the battered pot. Besides, I meant what I said. You would not make it alone. The Brennans have men everywhere, and even if you got past them, there are plenty of other dangers between here and anywhere safe. Elena wrapped her hands around the tin cup, absorbing its warmth. Why are you helping me? You do not even know me. Zachary considered the question. He had been asking himself the same thing since she stumbled into his camp. The simple answer was that it was the right thing to do, but there was something more, something he could not quite articulate. When he looked at her, he saw someone fighting against impossible odds, someone who refused to give up even when the world was determined to crush her. And maybe he recognized that because he had felt that way himself more times than he could count. Let us just say I do not have much love for men who think they can do whatever they want because of their name or their money, he said finally. And I have less love for a system that would hang you for defending your own life. She held his gaze for a long moment, and something passed between them, an understanding that did not need words. Thank you, she said quietly. They spent the night taking turns keeping watch. Zachary insisted Elena get some real sleep, and she was too exhausted to argue. He sat with his rifle across his knees, listening to the sounds of the Missouri night, the distant howl of coyotes, the rustle of small animals in the brush, the soft murmur of the creek. Twice he thought he heard horses, but when he moved to investigate, there was nothing but shadows and wind. As dawn broke, they broke camp quickly. Zachary left most of his cattle grazing in the valley. He could not drive them and keep Elena safe at the same time, and between the two, the choice was obvious. He kept only what supplies they could carry on Copper and on foot, and they started moving west, staying in the tree line whenever possible, avoiding open ground. The first 2 days passed without incident. They moved slowly, carefully, stopping frequently to listen and watch. Zachary taught Elena how to move quietly through the woods, how to read the landscape for signs of other travelers, how to cover their tracks. She learned quickly, her natural intelligence and determination overcoming her lack of experience. At night they talked. Elena told him about her life before Jacob, growing up in St. Louis as the daughter of a tailor, how her father had died when she was 18, leaving debts that her mother could not pay. Jacob Brennan had been in the city on business, had seen her in the shop, and had offered marriage. It seemed like a miracle at the time. A wealthy man willing to take her and help her mother with the debts. She did not realize until it was too late that Jacob saw her not as a wife, but as property, something he had purchased and could do with as he pleased. My mother thought I was living a dream, Elena said one night as they sat beside a small, smokeless fire. Every letter I sent home, I told her how wonderful everything was. I could not bear for her to know the truth. She died last year thinking I was happy. Zachary listened, adding small sticks to the fire. My parents died when I was young, he said. Cholera outbreak when I was 12. I had an older brother who looked after me for a while, but he was killed in the war. After that, it was just me. I have been on my own since I was 16. That must have been hard, Elena said. It was, but it also taught me to rely on myself, to trust my own judgment. Sometimes that is all you have. He looked at her across the flames. You are stronger than you think. You got yourself out of an impossible situation. Not everyone can do that. She smiled slightly, the first real smile he had seen from her. I do not feel very strong. Mostly I feel scared. Being scared does not mean you are not strong, Zachary said. It just means you understand what you are up against. On the third day, they had their first real scare. They were crossing a relatively open area, a stretch of grassland that offered little cover, when Zachary spotted riders coming from the south. There were 4 of them, moving at a steady pace, clearly searching the terrain. He and Elena dropped into a shallow ravine, pressing themselves against the earth, barely breathing as the riders passed within 200 yards of their position. Zachary recognized one of the men, a hard-faced individual named Garrett who worked for the Brennan family as a kind of enforcer. He had seen Garrett in Clifton Hill several times, always causing trouble, always making it clear he was untouchable because of who employed him. If Garrett was involved, it meant the Brennans were taking this very seriously. After the riders disappeared to the north, Zachary and Elena stayed hidden for another hour just to be sure. When they finally moved on, they changed direction, heading more northwest than straight west, taking a longer route that would hopefully throw off any pursuit. That night, they did not risk a fire. They ate dried beef and drank water from a stream, and they sat close together for warmth as the temperature dropped. Zachary found himself increasingly aware of Elena's presence, the way she moved, the sound of her voice, the determination in her eyes. He was starting to care about her in a way that went beyond simple human decency, and that complicated everything. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said in the darkness. "Of course. Have you ever been in love?" The question caught him off guard. "Once," he said after a moment. "A long time ago, a girl named Sarah. We were going to get married, but her family moved to California, and I could not leave my brother at the time. We wrote letters for a while, but eventually they stopped coming. I heard she married someone else. Do you regret it?" "Sometimes. But I have learned that regret does not change anything. You can only move forward, make the best of what you have." He paused. "What about you? Before Jacob, was there anyone?" "No. I never had the chance. My father kept me busy with the shop, and then he died, and then Jacob happened so quickly." She was quiet for a moment. "I used to dream about what love might be like. Real love, not the kind Jacob claimed to have for me. I imagined someone who would see me as an equal, who would respect me, who would make me feel safe instead of afraid." "You deserve that," Zachary said quietly. "Every person deserves that." She turned to look at him, and even in the darkness, he could feel the intensity of her gaze. "You have been kinder to me in these few days than Jacob was in 2 years." Something in her voice made his chest tighten. "Elena," he started, but she shook her head. "I know this is not the time or place. I know we are running for our lives and everything is complicated. I just wanted you to know that I see who you are and I am grateful." He reached out and took her hand, a simple gesture that felt monumental in that moment. "We are going to get you somewhere safe, I promise you that." They continued west, and as the days passed, Zachary watched Elena transform. The terrified woman who had stumbled into his camp was still there, but she was being replaced by someone harder, more capable. Elena learned to shoot, practicing with his spare pistol until she could hit a target with reasonable accuracy. She learned to read the land, to find water and edible plants, to set a snare for rabbits. She became a true partner in their journey rather than someone he was simply protecting. They had been traveling for just over 2 weeks when they reached the Kansas border. They had successfully avoided any more encounters with search parties, though twice they had found signs that men had been through the area, hoofprints and cold campfires. The Brennans were still looking, but their search was spreading thinner as the area to cover grew larger. They stopped in a small town called Cedar Ridge to buy supplies. It was a risk, but they needed food and ammunition, and their clothes were in such poor condition that they were attracting attention by their very appearance. Zachary went in alone while Elna waited with the horse outside of town, and he was careful to pay cash and not linger. The store owner was curious but not suspicious, and Zachary was back on the trail within an hour. That night, they allowed themselves a real fire and a hot meal. Elena had shot 2 rabbits that afternoon, and Zachary cooked them along with the last of their beans. They ate slowly, savoring the food, and for the first time since they had met, the atmosphere felt almost relaxed. "How much farther to Colorado?" Elena asked. "Another week, maybe 10 days if the weather holds. We have made good time considering we have been traveling careful." Zachary leaned back against his saddle. "My cousin's ranch is in the northern part of the state, up in the foothills. Beautiful country from what I remember." "You have been there before?" "Once when I was younger. Went out to help with a cattle drive. It was the farthest I had ever been from home at that point." He smiled at the memory. "I thought I was having the adventure of a lifetime." "And now?" Elena asked with a slight smile of her own. "Now I know that adventures are overrated. Give me a quiet life any day." She laughed, a genuine sound that made something warm bloom in his chest. "I think we are past the point of quiet lives, at least for now." "Maybe. But eventually this will be behind us. You will have a new name, a new start. You can be whoever you want to be." Elena looked at him thoughtfully. "What if I do not know who that is? I have been my father's daughter, then Jacob's wife. I have never just been Elena, just myself." "Then you will figure it out. You have time now, maybe for the first time in your life." He met her eyes across the fire. "And I will help you if you want." "I want that," she said softly. "I want that very much." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility and unspoken feelings. Zachary knew he was falling in love with her, had probably started falling the moment he decided to help her, but the circumstances made everything complicated. She was vulnerable, on the run, dependent on him for survival. He did not want to take advantage of that, did not want her to feel obligated to return feelings out of gratitude. But then Elna stood and came around the fire, sitting down beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Zachary," she said, and the way she said his name made his heart race. "I need you to know something. These feelings I have, they are not because you are helping me. They are not gratitude or desperation. When I look at you, I see the man I wished existed when I was dreaming about love. You are kind and strong and honorable, and you make me feel like I matter, like my life has value beyond what I can do for someone else." He turned to face her fully. "Elena, I care about you more than I probably should, but I do not want you to feel pressured. You are still healing from what Jacob did, and I do not want to be another man trying to claim you." She reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his rough skin. "You are nothing like Jacob. Nothing. And I am not healed, not completely, but I know what I feel. I know that when you smile at me, I feel safe. I know that when you touch my hand, I do not flinch. I know that I want to be near you, and not because I need protection, but because being with you makes me happy." Zachary covered her hand with his own. "I love you," he said, the words simple and true. "I know it is too soon, and I know we barely know each other, but I love you." "I love you too," Elena whispered, and then she kissed him. It was a gentle kiss, tentative and sweet, and it felt like the beginning of something new, something that belonged only to them. When they pulled apart, Zachary wrapped his arm around her, and she leaned against him, and they sat like that for a long time, watching the fire and listening to the night. They reached Colorado 6 days later, crossing into the territory on a cool October morning. The landscape changed dramatically, the flat plains giving way to rolling hills, and then to the dramatic rise of the Rocky Mountains in the distance. The air was thinner here, crisper, and Elena breathed it in with something like wonder. "It is beautiful," she said, looking at the mountains. "Wait until you see it up close," Zachary said. "There are valleys up there that look like something out of a dream." They found Zachary's cousin, Marcus Oakes, 3 days later. His ranch was a sprawling operation in a valley surrounded by pine-covered hills. Marcus was 10 years older than Zachary, a stocky man with a weathered face and a ready smile. He greeted them warmly, asking few questions and offering immediate hospitality. That night, over dinner with Marcus and his wife Catherine, Zachary explained the situation in broad terms. He told them that Elena was running from dangerous people back in Missouri, that she needed a place to start over, that he was hoping Marcus could help. He did not mention Jacob Brennan's name or the details of his death, and Marcus did not ask. Catherine, a practical woman with kind eyes, simply nodded and said they always had room for people willing to work. "You can stay in the foreman's cabin," Marcus said. "Old Hank retired last month and moved to town. It is not fancy, but it is clean and private. Catherine can help you get settled tomorrow, and we will figure out what work needs doing." Elena looked overwhelmed. "Thank you. We cannot repay this kindness." "You will repay it by making a good life here," Catherine said firmly. "That is all the payment we need." The foreman's cabin was small but well built, with a wood stove, a bed, a table, and 2 chairs. That first night, Zachary and Elena slept in the same space for the first time without the urgency of danger pressing on them. They lay in the bed, holding each other, talking quietly about the future. "We are safe here," Elena said, though her voice held a question. "We are safer than we have been," Zachary said carefully. "The Brennans do not have reached this far, and even if they did, you have a new name now. As far as anyone in Colorado is concerned, you are Elena Oakes, my wife." They had discussed the fiction on the road. It was the simplest way to explain their relationship and give Elena protection under Zachary's name. Marcus and Catherine knew it was not legally true, but they had agreed to support the story. Eventually, when enough time had passed and it was truly safe, they could make it real if that was what they both wanted. "I like the sound of that," Elena said softly. Elena Oakes. "So do I." They settled into life on the ranch with surprising ease. Zachary worked alongside Marcus and the other ranch hands, his experience with cattle making him immediately valuable. Elena helped Catherine with the household and garden, and in her spare time, she started training horses. It turned out she had a natural talent for it, a patience and understanding that allowed her to gentle even the most difficult animals. Within a month, she was managing that aspect of the ranch operation, and Marcus was genuinely impressed. The days developed a rhythm, hard work and simple pleasures, shared meals and quiet evenings. Zachary and Elena grew closer, learning each other in ways that had nothing to do with survival and everything to do with building a real life together. They learned each other's habits and preferences, their fears and dreams, the small things that made up a true partnership. Winter came early in the mountains that year. By late November, snow was falling regularly, and the ranch settled into its cold weather routine. The work was different, but no less demanding, and everyone pitched in to keep the livestock fed and healthy through the harsh months. One evening in December, Zachary and Elena were sitting by the stove in their cabin, playing cards and drinking coffee. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, but inside it was warm and comfortable. Elena put down her cards and looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. "I have been thinking," she said. "About what?" "About us. About the future. We have been living this lie, telling people we are married, but it does not feel like a lie anymore. It feels true, or at least it feels like it should be true. Zachary set down his own cards. What are you saying? I am saying that when spring comes, when the pass is open again, I want to go into Denver and make it legal. I want to actually marry you, Zachary. I want to be your wife for real. He felt a surge of emotion so strong it almost overwhelmed him. Are you sure? You know I would never pressure you. I know. That is one of the reasons I love you. But I am sure. I have never been more sure of anything. She reached across the table and took his hands. You saved my life, yes, but more than that, you gave me a reason to want to live. You showed me what love is supposed to be. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Zachary came around the table and pulled her to her feet, kissing her deeply. Yes, he said when they finally broke apart. Yes, we will get married in the spring. I will make you my wife in every way that matters. She smiled, that brilliant smile that transformed her face. I cannot wait. Winter passed slowly, the days short and cold, but the cabin remained a warm refuge. Zachary and Elena talked about their wedding, making plans, deciding what they wanted their future to look like. They talked about eventually having children, about maybe getting their own piece of land, about the life they would build together. In February, something happened that tested their newfound peace. A stranger arrived at the ranch, a man who claimed to be a cattle buyer looking at operations in the area. Marcus was suspicious but cordial, showing the man around and answering his questions. The stranger stayed one night and left the next morning, but Zachary had noticed the way the man looked at Elena. A little too long, a little too carefully. I think he might have been looking for you, Zachary said to Elena after the man left. Her face went pale. After all this time? The Brennans are wealthy and stubborn. They might have hired investigators, people to check anywhere someone might run. It might be nothing, but we should be careful. They talked to Marcus, who agreed to keep watch and let them know if the stranger or anyone like him came back. Zachary made sure Elena had a loaded pistol with her at all times and that she knew where the rifles were kept in the cabin. They were not going to be caught off guard. A week passed with no further incidents, and they started to relax again. The stranger had probably been exactly what he claimed, just a buyer scouting ranches. They had been running for so long that it was hard to shake the feeling of being hunted, but maybe they truly were safe now. Then on a cold morning in late February, everything came to a head. Zachary was in the barn, tending to a mare with an injured hoof when he heard horses approaching the ranch. He looked out and saw 4 riders, and his stomach dropped. He recognized one of them immediately, Garrett, the Brennan enforcer. They had found them. He ran for the cabin, bursting through the door. Elena, they are here. You need to hide now. She stood from the table where she had been mending a shirt, her face going white. Where? The root cellar. Go quickly. Do not come out no matter what you hear. She grabbed the pistol from the shelf and ran to the trap door hidden under a rug in the corner. Zachary helped her lift it and watched her descend into the darkness below. He dropped the door back in place and threw the rug over it, then arranged the table and chairs to look natural. He had just stepped outside when the riders reached the cabin. Garrett dismounted, his hand resting on his pistol. The other 3 men spread out, clearly experienced at intimidation. Zachary Oakes, Garrett said, his voice flat. We have been looking for you. I do not know what you want, Zachary said, keeping his voice calm despite the adrenaline flooding his system. I am just a ranch hand trying to make a living. Do not play dumb. We know you helped Elena Zimmerman escape from Missouri. We know you brought her here. Where is she? I do not know anyone by that name. Garrett took a step closer. We have witnesses who saw you leaving the area around the same time she disappeared. We have been tracking you for months. That buyer who came through here last week, he recognized her. So I am going to ask you one more time, where is she? Zachary squared his shoulders. And I am telling you, I do not know what you are talking about. One of the other men moved toward the cabin door. Maybe we should have a look inside, see what we can find. You are not going in there, Zachary said, his hand moving to his own pistol. Garrett smiled, a cold expression with no humor in it. You planning on shooting all four of us? Before Zachary could respond, Marcus appeared from the main house with two of his ranch hands, all three of them armed. There a problem here, Zachary? Marcus called out. Garrett glanced at the new arrivals, clearly recalculating the odds. This does not concern you. This is Brennan family business. Anything that happens on my ranch concerns me, Marcus said evenly. And I do not recall inviting you gentlemen here, so I am going to have to ask you to leave. We are not leaving without the woman, Garrett said. What woman? Marcus asked. There is no woman here except my wife, and I can guarantee she is not who you are looking for. The standoff stretched out, tension thick in the cold air. Zachary could see Garrett weighing his options, clearly wanting to push the issue, but aware that he was outgunned on unfamiliar territory. Finally, Garrett spoke again. The Brennan family wants justice for Jacob. Elena Zimmerman murdered him in cold blood. If you are hiding her, you are accessories to murder. Jacob Brennan was a wife-beater who tried to strangle his own spouse, Zachary said, the words coming out before he could stop them. She defended herself, and that is not murder. That is survival. So you do know her, Garrett said triumphantly. I know what I heard about this situation. I also know that powerful men think they can do whatever they want and never face consequences. Maybe this time, someone stood up to that, and maybe that is why the Brennans are so angry. It is not about justice, it is about control. Garrett's face darkened. You are making a big mistake. The only mistake here is you threatening people on my property, Marcus said, moving forward. You have 5 minutes to get on your horses and ride out. After that, we will consider you trespassers, and we will respond accordingly. For a moment, it seemed like Garrett might push further, but then he turned and remounted his horse. This is not over, he said. The Brennans do not forget. Neither do I, Zachary said quietly. The four men rode off, and everyone remained tense and armed until they disappeared from sight. Only then did Zachary run back into the cabin and pull open the trapdoor. Elena, it is safe. They are gone. She climbed out, shaking but unharmed. I heard everything. Zachary, you cannot protect me forever. They will keep coming. Then we will keep fighting them off. He pulled her into his arms. I am not letting them have you. I do not care who they are or how much money they have. Marcus came into the cabin. They will be back, probably with more men and maybe the law. We need a plan. They spent the rest of the day discussing options. Marcus suggested they ride to Denver and find a lawyer, someone who could help Elena make her case legally. Catherine proposed that Elena change her appearance more dramatically, cut and dye her hair, anything to make recognition harder. Zachary wanted to take Elena and run again, head deeper into the mountains where the Brennans could not reach them. In the end, Elena made the decision. I am tired of running. I am tired of being afraid. If they want to come after me, then let them. But I am going to fight this the right way. I will go to Denver, find a lawyer, and tell my story. Maybe nothing will come of it, but at least I will have tried. That could mean prison, Zachary said. That could mean worse. I know, but I cannot live the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, and I cannot let you and Marcus and everyone else here keep risking themselves for me. If there is any chance of real freedom, it has to come from facing this directly. They left for Denver 3 days later. Marcus came with them, and Catherine packed supplies for the journey. The ride down from the mountains took 2 full days, and they arrived in the city on a cold, gray morning. Denver in 1879 was a booming place, growing rapidly with the influx of miners and settlers. The streets were crowded, the buildings a mix of elegant new structures and rough frontier establishments. They found a lawyer named Thomas Whitmore who had a reputation for taking difficult cases and being willing to stand up to powerful interests. Whitmore listened to Elena's story in his cramped office, taking notes and asking pointed questions. When she finished, he sat back and studied her carefully. "This is going to be very difficult," he said. "You killed a man, even if it was in self-defense, and you fled the scene. The Brennan family will paint you as a cold-blooded murderer, and they have the resources to make that story stick." "So there is no chance?" Elena asked. "I did not say that. Self-defense is a recognized legal principle, and if we can establish a pattern of abuse, we might be able to make a case, but it will require going back to Missouri, facing trial, and trusting that a jury will believe you over the Brennan family narrative." "What are the odds?" Zachary asked. Whitmore shrugged. "Honestly, not great. Maybe 30% if we get a fair judge and a sympathetic jury. But there is another option. We could try to negotiate with the Brennan family directly. If they are pursuing you for revenge rather than justice, there might be a price at which they would be willing to let this go." "You mean pay them off?" Elena said. "Essentially, yes. It is not ideal, but it might be safer than a trial." They discussed it at length, weighing the options. Finally, Elena made her decision. "I want to try for a trial. If we pay them off, they will always have power over us. I want to stand up in court and tell the truth about Jacob, about what he did to me. Even if I lose, at least I will have said it publicly." Whitmore nodded. "Then we will need to prepare thoroughly. I will need to go to Missouri, talk to people who knew you and Jacob, gather evidence. It will take time." "How much time?" Zachary asked. "A few months at least. And you should know that once we initiate this process, the Brennans will come after you with everything they have. They will try to discredit you, intimidate witnesses, maybe even have you arrested before we are ready for trial. You will need to be very careful." They returned to the ranch to wait while Whitmore did his work. The next few months were tense, every day filled with the expectation that Garrett and his men might return. But winter gave way to spring without further incident, and slowly they started to hope that maybe the Brennans had decided it was not worth the effort. In April, Whitmore sent word that he was ready. He had gathered testimony from Elena's mother's neighbors in St. Louis, people who had seen her with bruises and had heard arguments through the walls. He had found a doctor who had treated her twice for injuries that she had claimed came from falling, but which the doctor suspected came from violence. He even had testimony from one of the Brennan household staff who had witnessed Jacob's temper and had seen the aftermath of his rages. "It is not perfect," Whitmore wrote in his letter, "but it is enough to build a defense. If you are ready, we should proceed." Elena and Zachary traveled to Missouri in late April. Marcus wanted to come, but they convinced him to stay and look after the ranch. The journey back east felt surreal, retracing the route they had taken 9 months earlier, but this time, moving toward danger rather than away from it. They arrived in Clifton Hill on a warm spring day. The town looked exactly as Zachary remembered it, a prosperous community built on the wealth of families like the Brennans. They met Whitmore at the courthouse, where he had already filed the necessary papers. The trial was set for 3 weeks later, time for both sides to prepare. The Brennan family hired 3 lawyers, expensive men from Kansas City with reputations for winning at any cost. They filed motions, tried to have the trial moved to a different venue, argued that Elena should be held without bail. Whitmore fought every motion, and the judge, an older man named Harrison, seemed determined to run a fair proceeding despite the pressure. Elena was allowed to stay out of jail pending trial, but only because Zachary posted the full amount of bail, money that Marcus had loaned them. They stayed in a boarding house on the edge of town, avoiding crowds and keeping a low profile. The 3 weeks passed slowly. Whitmore prepared Elena for testimony, teaching her how to remain calm under hostile questioning, how to tell her story clearly and sympathetically. Zachary could only watch and support her, feeling helpless in the face of the legal machinery grinding toward them. The trial began on a Monday morning in May. The courthouse was packed, people from all over the county coming to see the spectacle. The Brennan family sat in the front row, Thomas Brennan and his remaining 2 sons glaring at Elena with undisguised hatred. The prosecution went first, painting a picture of Elena as a scheming woman who had married Jacob for his money and then murdered him when the relationship soured. They produced witnesses who testified that they had never seen any signs of abuse, that Jacob had been a loving husband, that Elena had seemed unhappy with ranch life and had wanted to return to the city. It was all lies or half-truths, but it was presented persuasively. Then it was Whitmore's turn. He called Elena to the stand, and she told her story. She described meeting Jacob, the whirlwind courtship, the early signs of trouble that she had dismissed. She described the first time he hit her, the shock and shame, the apologies that followed. She described the escalating violence, the choking, the fear. And she described that final night, the terror of feeling his hands around her throat, the desperate grab for the pistol, the shot. By the time she finished, there were tears in her eyes, but her voice remained steady. The prosecution's cross-examination was brutal, trying to poke holes in her story, suggesting she was exaggerating or lying. But Elena did not waver. She answered every question honestly, even when the answers were not flattering, and Zachary could see some of the jury members looking at her with sympathy. Whitmore called his other witnesses, the doctor, the neighbors, the household staff member. Each one added weight to Elena's account, building a picture of a woman trapped in an abusive marriage, fighting for survival. The prosecution tried to discredit these witnesses, but their testimony held up. The doctor was particularly effective, describing Elena's injuries in clinical detail and stating his professional opinion that they were consistent with domestic violence rather than accidents. The trial lasted 6 days. The final arguments were passionate on both sides. The prosecution demanded justice for Jacob Brennan, a young man cut down in his prime. Whitmore spoke about the right of every person to defend their own life, about the failure of society to protect women from violent men, about the courage it took for Elena to tell her truth. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Zachary and Elena waited in their boarding house room, barely eating, unable to sleep. Finally, word came that a verdict had been reached. They walked into the courthouse together, holding hands. The room fell silent as the jury foreman stood. "We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty by reason of self-defense." The room erupted. Thomas Brennan stood, shouting about corruption and injustice. The judge hammered his gavel, calling for order. Elena collapsed against Zachary, sobbing with relief. It was over. She was free. The Brennan family stormed out of the courthouse, making threats that they would appeal, that they would see Elena punished one way or another. But Whitmore assured them that legally it was finished. The verdict could not be appealed, and Elena was free to go. They left Missouri the next day, not wanting to linger any longer than necessary. The journey back to Colorado felt completely different from the journey out. There was no fear now, no looking over their shoulders. Elena had faced the worst and come through the other side. When they reached the ranch in early June, Marcus and Catherine greeted them with a celebration. The entire household gathered for a dinner filled with joy and relief. That night, Zachary and Elena sat on the porch of their cabin, looking at the stars. "It is really over," Elena said wonderingly. "I am actually free." "You are. And now we can have the life we planned." Zachary turned to her. "So what do you say? Should we make that trip to Denver and get married for real?" She smiled. "I thought you would never ask." They were married 3 weeks later in a small church in Denver, with Marcus and Catherine standing as witnesses. Elena wore a simple dress that Catherine had helped her sew, and Zachary wore his best clothes. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Zachary kissed Elena with all the love and promise of their future. They returned to the ranch and continued building their life together. Elena's horse training business grew, and eventually they were able to buy a piece of land adjacent to Marcus's ranch. They built a house, nothing fancy, but solid and comfortable, a real home. 2 years after their wedding, Elena gave birth to their first child, a son they named Benjamin. He had Zachary's dark eyes and Elena's strong will, and he filled their lives with joy and chaos in equal measure. 2 years after that, a daughter arrived, Clara, quieter than her brother, but every bit as determined. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm of work and family, of quiet mornings and loud dinners, of watching their children grow and their love deepen. There were still hard times, winters that tested their endurance, illnesses that frightened them, disagreements that required working through. But they faced everything together, partners in every sense of the word. Years later, when Benjamin was 12 and Clara was 10, they made a trip back to St. Louis so Elena could visit her mother's grave. It was the first time she had been back since leaving with Jacob all those years ago. Standing in the cemetery, she told her children about their grandmother, about the life she had lived before meeting their father. "Were you scared?" Clara asked. "When you had to run away?" "I was terrified," Elena said honestly. "But I was also determined to survive. And I met your father, which was the best thing that ever happened to me." Zachary put his arm around her waist. "She saved me as much as I saved her," he said. "We saved each other." They returned to Colorado, to their ranch and their life. The children grew, eventually bringing home partners of their own. The house filled with grandchildren, with noise and laughter and the wonderful chaos of family. Marcus and Catherine grew old gracefully, eventually passing within months of each other, leaving their ranch to their own children, but maintaining close ties with Zachary and Elena. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Zachary and Elena rode up into the mountains, just the two of them, recreating that journey they had taken so long ago. They camped under the stars, and Elena looked at the man beside her, his hair now streaked with gray, his face lined from years of outdoor work. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, "risking everything to help me?" Zachary reached for her hand, the gesture as natural now as breathing. "Never. Not for a single moment. You gave me a purpose, a reason to be the man I wanted to be. You gave me love and family and a life worth living." "You did the same for me," Elena said. "You showed me that I was worth saving, worth fighting for. You gave me freedom and love and a home." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead, the same stars that had watched over them on that desperate flight so many years ago. But now there was no fear, no running, no secrets. There was only the life they had built together, strong and true and lasting. The cowboy had kept her secret when it mattered most, and then he had helped her reach a place where the secret did not matter anymore, where she could simply be herself, loved and safe and free. It was more than either of them could have imagined on that September evening when she stumbled into his camp with blood on her hands and terror in her eyes. Years passed, and their children built their own lives, some staying in Colorado, others seeking their own adventures. Benjamin became a rancher like his father, taking over the land and expanding the operation. Clara married a doctor and moved to Denver, where she worked with women in difficult situations, using her mother's story to inspire others to find their own strength. Zachary and Elena grew old together, their love never diminishing even as their bodies weakened and their steps slowed. They sat on their porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over the mountains, telling each other stories they had shared 100 times before, finding new meaning in old memories. When Zachary died at the age of 78, peacefully in his sleep, Elena mourned him deeply, but without regret. They had been blessed with 50 years together, 5 decades of partnership and love. She lived another 3 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandfather, about the man who had risked everything for a stranger and gained a lifetime of love in return. When Elena passed at the age of 81, they buried her next to Zachary on a hill overlooking their ranch. The headstones were simple, bearing their names and dates, but also a few words that captured the essence of their story. On Zachary's stone, it read, "He kept the faith and found love." On Elena's, it read, "She survived and thrived." Their grandchildren would bring their own children to that hill, would tell the story of how their great-grandparents met, how love and courage had built a legacy that continued through generations. The details would sometimes change, the story growing and shifting as stories do, but the core truth remained constant. In 1878, in the wildlands of Missouri, a woman running for her life met a man willing to risk his own. They fell in love on a desperate journey toward freedom, and they built a life that neither of them could have imagined when they started. It was a love story born from darkness but sustained by light, a testament to the power of courage, compassion, and commitment. The house they built still stood decades later, occupied now by Benjamin's son and his family, the walls holding echoes of all the love and laughter that had filled them. The land they had worked continued to produce, feeding new generations, providing livelihoods and homes. The horses that grazed in the pastures were descendants of the ones Elena had trained, carrying forward her legacy of patience and understanding. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, when the wind came down from the mountains just right, it seemed like you could still hear them, Zachary and Elena, talking softly on the porch, laughing at some shared joke, living out the love story that had started with a desperate act of survival and transformed into something beautiful and lasting. They had both been running from something when they met, Zachary from a life without purpose, Elena from a death that seemed inevitable. But together, they had found what they needed, a partnership built on respect and trust, a love that weathered every storm, a legacy that would outlast them both. In the end, that was what mattered, not the fear or the danger or the desperate flight across half a continent, not the trial or the threats or the powerful family that wanted revenge. What mattered was that they had found each other, that they had chosen love over fear, courage over convenience, and that they had built something real and lasting from the ashes of Elena's old life. The cowboy had kept her secret, and in doing so, he had given her the chance to become someone new, someone whole, someone free. And she had given him the same gift, the chance to be the man he was meant to be, the hero of his own story, the partner in a love that would define both their lives. Their story became legend in that part of Colorado, told and retold, embellished and simplified, but always carrying the same message. That love can grow in the most unlikely soil, that courage can come from unexpected places, and that sometimes the people who save us are the ones we save in return. Years after both of them were gone, a writer came to the area, researching stories of the Old West. She heard about Zachary and Elena, tracked down their descendants, read the court transcripts from Elena's trial, pieced together the journey they had taken. She wrote their story, and it became a book that people read across the country, a tale of love and survival that resonated with anyone who had ever felt trapped, who had ever needed saving, who had ever taken a chance on someone or something that seemed impossible. The book ended with a quote from one of Elena's letters, written to a friend late in her life. People often ask me how I survived, how I found the strength to run and fight and keep going when everything seemed hopeless. The truth is, I did not do it alone. I found a man who saw me not as a victim to be pitied or a criminal to be punished, but as a person worth fighting for. He gave me the greatest gift anyone can give, the chance to choose my own future, and I chose him every day for the rest of our lives together. That was the true ending of their story, not in death, but in the choice to love, made every single day through joy and sorrow, through ease and hardship, through all the ordinary and extraordinary moments that make up a life. Zachary and Elena had started their journey as strangers, brought together by desperate circumstances, but they had become something far greater. Partners, lovers, best friends, the foundation of each other's lives. And that was worth everything they had endured, every risk they had taken, every moment of fear and uncertainty. Because in the end, they had found what everyone searches for, a love that made them better, stronger, more fully themselves. A love that built a family and a legacy. A love that endured beyond death itself, living on in the stories told by firelight, in the memories of children and grandchildren, in the very land they had worked and shaped and called home. The Wild West of 1878 was a hard and often cruel place, but it was also a place where transformation was possible, where a person could leave behind their past and become someone new. Elena Zimmerman, who became Elena Oakes, who became a mother and grandmother and legend, proved that with courage and help from someone who believed in her. Zachary Oakes, who became a husband and father and hero, proved that sometimes saving someone else is the best way to save yourself. Together, they proved that love could bloom anywhere, even in the dust and danger of a desperate flight, even between two people who had every reason to mistrust and every obstacle in their path. They proved that the best stories are not about perfect people in perfect circumstances, but about real people making difficult choices, taking enormous risks, and building something beautiful from the broken pieces of their lives. Their story ended not with a dramatic rescue or a final confrontation, but with decades of quiet daily choice to love each other, to build together, to face whatever came as a united front. That was the real happy ending, not a moment but a lifetime, not a conclusion, but a continuation of love that rippled outward through time and touched everyone who heard it. And so the story of the cowboy and the woman he saved, who saved him in return, became part of the land itself, as permanent as the mountains, as enduring as the endless sky over Colorado. It became a reminder that even in the darkest moments, love can find a way, and that sometimes the people who seem weakest are actually the strongest of all. Elena had killed her husband to save her own life, and in doing so, had found a man who showed her what love truly meant. Zachary had risked everything for a stranger, and in doing so, had found the purpose and partnership he had been searching for all his life. They had both been saved, both transformed, both given the chance to become more than they ever thought possible. And in the end, that was the greatest legacy of all. Not just the children and grandchildren, not just the land and the stories, but the simple, profound truth that love can redeem, can heal, can transform even the most desperate situation into something beautiful. That was what Zachary and Elena gave the world, not just through their own story, but through the inspiration it provided to countless others who needed to believe that escape was possible, that love was real, that starting over was not just a dream, but an achievable reality. The sun set over their ranch every evening, painting the sky in colors of fire and gold, and if you listened carefully, you could almost hear them still, the cowboy and his wife, talking quietly about their day, planning for tomorrow, grateful for every moment they had together. That gratitude, that appreciation for the life they had built together, was perhaps the most lasting part of their legacy. They had started with nothing but fear and determination, but they had built a love story that would outlast them both, that would continue to inspire and comfort and challenge everyone who heard it. And in that way, they achieved a kind of immortality, not through grand gestures or dramatic moments, but through the simple act of choosing love every day for the rest of their lives. That was how their story truly ended, not with an ending at all, but with a continuation, a love that lived on in the lives they had touched, the family they had created, the land they had nurtured, and the hope they had inspired in everyone who needed to believe that even the most impossible situation could be overcome with courage, determination, and love.